Hello boys, hello girls. This is just an introductory video so you can start to think about economic regions. So far we have studied climate regions and it is time to pass to studying now this second type of regions that are about economy. So before we start doing that, the first and obvious question is what is economy? And the second question that may come to mind is it all about money? About money, sorry. Is everything in economy about money? And well, actually, not really. I know that over here I am using as an icon this bill, this dollar, but not everything about economy is about money. Actually, there are some economic systems in which money doesn't even exist. So we're going to study a bit about that in just a few moments. Well, first of all, what is economy? We may use this very simple definition of economy that is telling us that basically economy deals with how humans exploit nature in order to cover their needs. So, well, you may very well think that if you go to the fields and you start growing your own crops and you start growing your own food and raising your own animals, well, you don't need money for that, right? You wouldn't actually be having or engaging in any transactions with money. You would only be exploiting the soil and exploiting the animals in order to get your food. So there is no money in that. And however, there is economy because you are exploiting nature in order to cover your needs. And this word here in yellow, needs, is very important. But before we move to that, I need to tell you that I ask you to please write all of this in your notebook. Remember that these videos are not just for you to watch, but for you to study. So, economic regions would be the title. What is economy? Is economy all about money? And this very brief definition that is stating that basically in its simplest form, of course, economy deals with much larger things and much more complex things. But in this very simple, let's say, way of seeing economy, it is dealing basically with how us humans and our societies cover our needs through exploiting nature. And if you remember, we actually have one of these elements of geography that deals with human environment interaction. So basically, over there, we would place economy inside human environment interaction. So, going back to this thing about the needs, what are the needs? Well, I am presenting you, I want to introduce you to this very bright anthropologist called Bronislaw Malinowski. And we're going to study a lot about Malinowski this trimester because he was able to carry out a lot of research related not only to economy but also to politics, to family systems. He was really a great researcher, and actually, well, I know that throughout your education, you have learned that there are more than one type of needs. That you have primary needs, that you have secondary needs, and he's actually one of the main developers of these ideas. So let me explain you a bit more of what he is trying to tell us. Basically, I have two groups of pictures here. In one side, or basically in the top over here, you have what we would call primary needs. And down here, you have what we would call secondary needs. So, what are primary needs? Primary needs are all the things that you require and well that you require to live. There are things related to our organism, the things that we need in order to stay alive. So these would be our primary needs, the ones that we need as living organisms. But down here we have our secondary needs. These things are things that we need not to stay alive, but to cover our social and cultural deals. For example, you certainly do not need the outfit. this work? Because it is a bit complex. Maybe one could say, well, we don't need the secondary things to live. But in a certain way, we actually do. Why? Well, maybe, and let me introduce it. This was the very first cell phone that I had when I was in elementary school. This was a cell phone that was a newest cell phone. And I was one of the few kids that had a newest phone. But nowadays you want this one, right? So you may say, okay, you may go to your parents and tell them, Mom, Dad, I need the iPhone 12. And they will tell you, you need the iPhone 12? Well, I don't think that you need it, because what you need is to be able to communicate with us and to tell us if you have any emergency. So basically, any phone that is able to take and make calls and to receive and to send messages would be more than enough. So we're going to buy you this Nokia because you don't require anything else. You don't need anything else. What is the thing? Well, is that when we're talking about this cultural things, you are basically speaking about status. So you're not going to have the same status if you have the iPhone 12. Of course, if you have the iPhone 12, you're going to be one of the cool kids, right? You're going to be on top of the social structure of your school, of all the groups that have been formed in school. And if they buy you this one, well, they're going to be in the bottom of the social structure. And by no means you can use this argument and say that your geography teacher told you that you need the iPhone 12. Not at all. What I need you to understand is how these things work in society, how the fact of belonging to certain groups usually requires having these possessions, having or covering these secondary needs. For example, imagine I want to be a part of the um, I don't know, of a banking club where everybody is really, really rich. And I go there with my very old car that Selena could encargar poco a poquito. And of course, they're not going to admit me or to accept me into that club. They are not going to even let me in the facilities. I would require to get there in a very new car, in a very elegant car, and in that moment, when I get to the doors, they're going to ask me, oh, Mr. Watson, please come in, right? You require these things in order to belong to certain social groups. And I'm not saying that that is precisely correct. And I am not saying that we should replicate it. What I am saying is that that is how your society works, the society that we live in. However, there are other societies in which the status is going to be given not by possessing a lot of things, but by destroying all your wealth. The social group that is able to destroy the most amount of their belongings is going to have the highest status in society. Or in other societies, the highest status is achieved when you help other people. Instead of keeping all these things, you can give them away, and that is going to give you a lot of status. So we should question ourselves if this way of thinking in our society is the best possible way, even though we need to be pretty sure, or we need to be we need to be able to notice that this is the way in which our society works. We need to be able to see it. However, we should also be able to criticize it and to think in other ways. But this is very important. Why? Because imagine, we're saying that these are not things that you need to live. However, imagine that you are a very wealthy person and you suddenly lose all your money and you suddenly do not have access to Michael Kors bags or to Rolex clocks or whatever. And you're not going to be accepted into your social group anymore, right? Because now you were rich and now you're not. So, how are you going to live? Because you also don't know how to survive as people with no money do. You don't know how to do it, but you don't have the money to belong to the highest social class anymore. So you're in problems and you will have a lot of issues getting your own living. So usually when we say that secondary things are things that you don't quite require to live, well, that is not always true. You need it to belong to your society and to the social group where you belong. And if you are not able to be there, well, then your own survival may be at risk because you only know how to survive there. You wouldn't know how to survive. For example, picture yourself. It would be pretty difficult for you to survive in a public school, in not only a public school, but a public school in a rural area, in deep into the fields, and in another state where you don't have a city and so on, where you live in a town. So, well, maybe they are not related to survival, but they are certainly in a way related to it. Now, finally, I want to talk about the three ways that we have in order to define a climate region. The criteria, sorry, I said climate again. The criteria that we use in order to define an economic region. You know very well now what are the criteria that we use for climate regions. That is the average between precipitation, temperature, and change within seasons. But now, speaking about economy, we have basically three ways or three criteria to define these type of regions. First of all, the resources, because if we are saying that economy basically deals in its most elementary aspects with the survival of people, of how we get our living out of nature, well, then resources would be the very first way of thinking about this. What resources do we have to our disposal? What resources are available in our environment? So in some places there is a lot of gold, in some places there is oil, in some places there are grasses and animals that live there, and all of them are resources. So one of the criteria that we may use in order to think about economic regions are the resources that you can find in these places. Remember that a region is a group of places that have criteria in common, or places grouped by common criteria. So if you have a bunch of places that share resources, then you can speak about a first type of economic region. Not quite yet, but yes, it is a first step. What would be the second and perhaps more solid step to speak about an economic region? Well, the type of economic activity that they carry out in those places. For example, we have three types of economic activities. The primary economic activities, in which what you do is basically exploiting these resources. So everything related to getting the resources out of nature, that is the primary field of economic activity. For example, fishing, like you can see here in the picture, mining, getting wood out of forests, which is forestry, wooding, no, forestry. Fishing, forestry, of course, growing crops, so agriculture, well, I already said mining, and so on. Everything related to getting the resources out of nature. Then the second type of economic activity, the secondary economic activity, deals with the transformation of those materials that you get out of nature. For example, out of nature I got minerals, but now I am going to transform them into, I don't know, some sticks made out of metal for construction, right? So that transformation that you're going to be carrying out in those minerals in order to make them sticks for construction, that is a secondary economic activity. Why? Because secondary economic activity deals with the transformation. For example, manufacture, and basically you can say it as making a product, because a product is not just a material. A product is something that was produced, something that had behind some hands doing something to it, or perhaps some machines transforming this material into a product. So basically, all the economic, a very important part of the economic cycle is transforming materials into products, and then those products, of course, will be sold or exchanged. Okay. Finally, the tertiary economic activity is services. For example, I sell my services. I, as a teacher, I do not transform raw material. I do not extract raw material. I sell my services as a teacher. And most of your parents, I'm sure, that do the same. For example, bankers. Bankers offer their services. Doctors offer their services. Even the ladies that help us at home to get everything clean and nice, those ladies offer their services. So that is the tertiary economic activity, services. Uh, so far we have seen, and please remember to write this in your notebook, some of the criteria that we may use in order to define economic regions, that is resources, the type of economic activity, primary, secondary, and tertiary, and finally the type of economic system in which you live. There are basically four types of economic systems that you can group into two. For example, you have traditional systems and modern systems. Traditional systems are very particular, and there are perhaps the most interesting types of economic systems, and we are going to study a lot about that, using mainly the research of Malinowski and many other anthropologists, sociologists, and other type of social researchers. But in traditional economy, we do not have money, and the individual is actually not important. In our modern societies, we only care about us, right? We are individualistic societies. But in traditional economies, the individual is not important, the group is important, and they don't have money. So that is the first type, traditional economies. Within modern economies, we have three types of economies. We have command economies, we have planned economies, and finally we have free enterprise economy. What are command economies? Command economies, and basically you can define these type of systems in modern systems based on the relation between the market and the state. Remember, state with capital S, and in this case market too with capital M. The relation between the market and the state in common economies is that the state rules the market. So that is what we know as socialist countries, or countries with socialist economy. In the socialist economy, what you have is the state ruling over the market, controlling absolutely all the economy. Then the next type is a mixed or planned economy. You can call it either way, mixed or planned economy. In a mixed or planned economy, both the state and private companies share the market. You can start a company, own your own company, and sell your products in the market or offer your services in the market, but also the state has property and has decisions over the market. And this is the type of economy that most of us countries in the world have. Why? Because the next type, the final type, is free enterprise economy. And in free enterprise economy, the state is not supposed to enter the market and is not supposed to say anything about the market. Only privately owned companies can participate in the market. And well, there is not a single country in which that happens. Why? And that is also positive. Why? Because having the state entering the market also means that the state can defend your rights as workers. For example, the state can defend the minimum wage, the minimum amount of money that a company is going to pay you. If the state is not able to enter the market and only privately owned companies can have a saying in the market, well, then they can pay you whatever they want. And well, no one can do anything about it, and they can even compete to see who pays you the less. So well, that is the basic idea. Of course, we're going to keep developing this, but please just remember which are the three criteria that we have in order to define economic regions, which are these three types of economic activities, and which are these four economic systems. Again, the main groups are traditional and modern systems. In traditional systems, you do not have money, and the individual is not important. What is important is the group. In modern economies, you can have three types of economies, depending on the relation between the state and the market. The first one is the command economy, in which the state rules the market. There is no place for privates, only the state can rule the market. The second one is the planned or mixed economy, in which most of the countries, including Mexico, United States, and so on, are, which is a type of economic system in which both the state and privately owned companies can have a share of the market. And finally, the last type of economic system will be the free enterprise economy, in which only privately owned companies can have a share of the market, but not the state. Okay, so thank you very much and see you next class.